The NES was a really weird console, not in terms of games as there were actually a lot of outstanding ones to be found on it, but more in terms of the fact that the difficulty had a really hard time deciding what direction it wanted to go in. Some games were balanced, some games were pretty shitty with that, and some were just okay. In terms of Contra, I'm not really sure where to put it. I mean, it's still incredibly enjoyable, but without the help of the Konami code, it's pretty unfun to play. It is a good way to brag to your friends and say you beat it without it, but for yourself, it's kinda like torture. This was released at a much different time in the history of Konami. It definitely wasn't like the 90s where they were revered for the Metal Gear and Silent Hill series, but it's also very different than it is now, where they're the joke of the industry. Because let's be honest, Kojima was what was keeping them afloat. But let's focus more on Contra and what made it such a good game. Well, first of all, you can't forget the gameplay, because this game is addictive like fuck. Every movement you make feels good and natural, and whenever you die, and as cliche as it sounds, it is going to be your fault. This thing controls really well. And of course, there's the music, which I still listen to, even today. But you can't forget the fact that the alien part of this game is kind of phoned in, and doesn't really seem to have that much thought put into its placement. And that's not me trying to nitpick about random bullshit, it actually kind of bothers me the way that they handle this. It takes all of one level, and suddenly you are fighting aliens everywhere. Up to that point, it was all normal action game NES crap. Bad Russians, or, something like that. But then you finish the third level and something that looks like H.R. Geiger appears and you have to kill it. And don't say that you can't build up something in an NES game, because even a cutscene at the beginning would have worked. But maybe I'm totally wrong, and this is actually brilliant. I mean, what other game does this? What other game suddenly throws a new type of gameplay at you and expects you to adapt? Or maybe I'm right and this is totally dumb. I don't know. I'm too stupid to make decisions on my own. One of my favorite things in games, mostly indie, is when YouTubers appear in them. It is so awesome for me to hear someone on the internet and then go to something else and hear them being their same goofy self in a game which I can interact with. Think about your favorite time with this. I can actually only think of one really good one myself. Can you guess what it is? It is none other than the beautiful man himself, Stamper! In late summer 2013, the behemoth, known as such classics as Castle Crashers and Alien Hominid, released the game BattleBlock Theater to the masses on the Xbox Marketplace. The catch to this was that the very hilarious YouTuber Stamper was the narrator, and it was hilarious. This is downright one of the goddamn funniest games I have ever played. The plot, I can't even really call it that, is that Hattie and his people were all sailing on their vessel, the Friend Ship, when suddenly a massive storm causes them to be washed ashore an island ran entirely by sentient cats. Hattie gets brainwashed by an evil top hat, his people are all terrified, and now your only hope for survival is to go through massive obstacle courses set up by the cats. But I'm just a boring guy. Listen to the way that Stamper puts it.
But it wouldn't be very ladylike of me if I didn't mention the most noteworthy friend on board, Hattie Hattington. But the eye of the storm is very misleading, children. Never turn your back on it because the ocean was all like, psych! And it came back even bigger this time, twice as big. As if Poseidon himself extended his hand in friendship and they spat in his mouth.
That is what makes this game. But of course, one hilarious character is not enough to justify its placement on this list. This game is filled to the brim with awesome stuff, including the soundtrack, which I listen to while scripting. Let's do it. God, I'm gonna die a virgin. This is also backed up with superb platforming gameplay. It seems like the Behemoth can't make a bad game because they made a god tier beat 'em up, and now they've done the same with platformers. Each new world that you go through has, well, I hesitate to call them gimmicks because they really are more than that. I'd rather go with innovations because all of these things are really awesome and introduce new ways to get around. And even though this game was made for multiplayer, you can still have a grand time with single player, but I almost forgot about the Steam version. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's probably just the same with some minor tweaks, right? Well, yeah, I'd be lying if I said it was a completely new experience with new things to do, but the minor tweak that was included is really awesome. You get to essentially create your own heads for your character. Now, this might not sound that big at first, until you consider that this means you can play as anyone you want. Well, if they're created at least. But with a community that is still going strong, it isn't that hard to find them. This game is really creative overall. And you can't forget a healthy dose of Stamper!
And the floorboards were buckling and creaking and breaking, and pieces of their ship were raining down like shards of broken dreams. And then Reginald comes upstairs and he's all like, "I say, gentlemen, I do believe we're in quite a spot of bother."
Never gets old. Guest entry!
While the original Mega Man X is great, I personally think X2 improves on almost everything about the first game. First of all, you have the dash ability right at the start of the game, which allows a wider variety of different playthroughs since you're not just locked at Chill Penguin or whatever first thing, because he has the dash ability. Second of all,
I'm not a rapper, so stop rapping at me.
I meant to say, your weapons have more uses than just killing small enemies and bosses faster. You can try to get the Buster upgrade earlier with Wire Sponge's weapon, you can charge Moth's weapons for a second dash, etc. And third, it's just a really fun and well-made game. You should play it.
Nowadays, there seems to be a trend running with the Kirby series, and it's been followed by the past few that have been released. That's that there has to be some sort of gimmick. I'm talking about things like the Hypernova, special copy abilities, and other things like them. And actually, if you look at this entire series as a whole, you can see that that pattern was followed by most in the series. But there is one that seems to stick out if you're testing them in that light. And it's Squeak Squad, because come on guys, what was the thing that made it stand out? This doesn't mean it's bad in the slightest, because if you even slightly imply that, I will cut you. I'm just saying it's a little odd, especially because even at this point, the games were already trying to push new things. Innovations, I don't know. But for serious legit, this game kicks some major ass. The plot is one of the most beautifully simple things ever. Kirby's cake gets stolen and he wants it back. As you go along in the game, you slowly find out that it was a team named the Squeak Squad, and then you pick them off one by one. Kirby's out for blood! I do have a minor issue with the graphics though. Yeah, they're appealing, but that's only because they were taken straight from Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. But these games were only 2 years apart, so I'm not really holding it against them. That's why it's a minor problem. But there are some other problems that do come up as you play the game. But remember, I think this game is close to perfect, so... go ahead. Insult it. The only real problem that I have with it is that you will on a few occasions have to fight the members of the Squeak Squad more than once. But they're still just as fun as they were the first time, so once again, no harm, no foul. This game, man, I really enjoy it. I don't know why I seem to be drawn to it to such a degree. Maybe it's because the magic ability is fucking awesome. Maybe it's because I actually played this a lot to pass the time at my brother's Little League games. Or maybe it's just because it's a generally good game. I can't have all the answers. You decide for once! Yeah, that's the entire segment, so what? Oh, Shahi, how you make me rage. So, some of you might recall that back in part 2 of this list, I talked about a little game called Out of This World. And before you ask, yes, Mike Aruba is still best meme. Anyway, the creator of that game, after finishing it up, wanted to make bigger and better things. So he went from working on a small game by himself to making what I'd call a very technologically advanced game with a team of 13 people. It included pre-rendered graphics, thousands of frames of 2D animation, a whole orchestra, and you can't forget that they added in a whole lot of bullshit because this is one of the most infuriating games I've ever played. I don't know how they did it, but Eric and his team of people managed to make a game more rage-inducing than Dark Souls. I didn't even think that was possible. Congratulations! You make my blood boil! It's not even implemented well! Most difficult games slowly build up to the hardness of it all, but nope! This game starts hard and it ends hard, but it's still really enjoyable all the way through. And therein lies my complex with this game. On one hand, its difficulty is comparable to someone punching you in the balls over and over through your entire playthrough, but the art style is also really beautiful and the music is amazing. I don't know if I should hate this thing with a passion or love it for everything it does right. I choose a mixture of both. That's why it's only at 65. If the difficulty was spaced out more evenly, then maybe it would be higher. But as of now, in its current state, this is what I've decided to do. But moving away from all that, I really need to talk about how much I love the animation in this game. It's good. Like, seriously good. I've researched it, and the reason that this game took almost 7 years to make after Out of This World came out is because of all the 2D animation they did. I know I've never talked about this before on my channel, but I am a sucker for animation. I've loved it my whole life, and I think I always will. And as much as I still respect it today because of the people who devote their entire livelihood to it, there's something I respect even more. Hand-drawn animation. The fact that someone could spend months making one episode of something baffles my mind. And they did it for a game. That is insane. I don't have that patience, and I'm willing to bet a good deal of you don't have it either. Oh, and the gameplay is also really kick-ass too. But who cares about that when we can talk about all this animation? Programmers? Pfft, more like programmers. Everything else can suck a dick. Animation is the king here. I like to apologize to everyone I just offended. I know how hard it is to make a game, and I know how hard it is to make your dreams just come true. I thank you for all the joy you brought me over the years. Now, since every segment has to end with a joke, here's a fart sound. Can I be famous now? And now it's time to visit space again, where no one can hear you scream.
Shut the fuck up!
Sorry, I forgot I'm not in space. So, Metroid. We've talked about it a grand total of twice so far on here. Let's change that. With the release of the GameCube and not the N64 because there wasn't a Metroid game on there for some reason, Nintendo thought it was finally time for this series to go three-dimensional. But of course, they had to choose wisely. I mean, Metroid was one of Nintendo's biggest franchises, so you can't just give it out to anybody. Well, that's actually where this little story takes an interesting turn. Nintendo handed development of this over to Retro Studios, who before this was... well, they were nobody. And before I actually played the game and I heard this, I was terrified. Metroid was and still is one of my favorite franchises, so hearing that a company that didn't work on anything notable before this was in charge made me pee my pants a little bit. Metroid Prime has honestly become one of my favorite games. Funny story, since I was such an ignorant little fuck when I was younger, I actually thought that Metroid Prime 2 was the original. And then I played the original, and I didn't much care for it actually. I thought it was a great deal of fun, sure, but since I was still relatively young, I couldn't find my way around, and so I was forever destined to have an unknowing fate. Then recently, when the trilogy was released on the Wii U Virtual Console, I was finally able to play it and beat it, and my word, it's awesome. Then I actually played it, and may I just say, this game was sent from the heavens! And can I just say that this game is really beautiful? Like seriously, if Phendrana Drifts is such a pretty place, I wish it was a real thing that you could go and visit. You know, except without all the killer aliens and monsters and shit. The way that this game is paced is also brilliant, as it's very easy to get into. This is one of those games where you'll think you'll play it for 10 minutes before bed, and then you end up playing it into the night. There is no short game of Metroid Prime. Every one is an experience that you have to enjoy. And I actually find the ability lost to be fun for once. Usually it's the most tedious part of any given Metroid game, and almost guarantees that I'll lose interest pretty quick. I will eventually beat it, but until I'm given a specific power that I enjoy, it's just an unpleasant process. However, here it's very different, and everything is really fun to find. When seeing a restriction and knowing what ability you need to get around said restriction, it is incredibly motivating to go and find it. Metroid Prime, at its core, is a game that you are going to enjoy. Even if you get lost, just take a small break and come back. I promise that it'll be worth it when you beat it. In space, no one can hear you party, because you die. Like Danny Sexbang over here. So, we just talked about a series I love, so what's the next logical step? To talk about a series I'm not particularly fond of. He's the fastest thing alive! Sonic. It's Sonic. Okay, I know that I didn't really bring this up when I talked about Sonic Adventure because I love that game too much, but I'm not the biggest fan of Sonic. If anything, I think he's kinda stupid. And I'm not just talking about his games, though trust me, those will come up eventually. I'm more talking about his universe. But honestly, that's a rant for another time, as this is a top 100 of positivity, so let's try and keep it positive. So there's a really weird pattern of Sonic games on the Wii. It's a super mixed bag of what you're going to find. We have the ungodly awful with Secret Rings in the Wii version of Unleash, the surprisingly okay with Black Knight, and the surprisingly masterful with Sonic Colors. Because really, this game is awesome. There are many reasons for that, but I think the biggest has got to be with the introduction of this game's gimmick, the Wisps. And yes, I am okay with calling them gimmicks, as that's what I believe them to be. The plot of this game is pretty simple. It's Sonic in space! This sounds really familiar. Huh, I can't think of what it is. Funny. Anyway, the level design in this game is really great, and each one feels fun to get through. That was my biggest problem with Generations. Each level felt like an ordeal, and I wasn't having fun as I did it. But that's Remedy tier, as everything feels unique. There's not one level that has the same type of layout or mechanic. Even when you play 2 levels from the same zone, it's a different experience. And that's good, because most Sonic games seem to have difficulty with that area in particular. And then there's the thing that almost every Sonic game gets right, and this one is no exception. The soundtrack. Reach for the stars. That is all. But in all seriousness, I do enjoy that once again, this soundtrack is very different from all the others in this series. If you let me listen to a song from this game, I can distinguish it from any other Sonic game. And that's very good, because it means that it isn't generic. Unlike Sonic Boom. Oh, I just caught myself. I almost mentioned the bad part in the game. I better get going before I happen to mention that I still think Generations is crap. Shit! Guys, I'm faced with a dilemma. Out of everyone I've talked to who's a fan of the Jak series, no one, and I mean no one, is a fan of Jak 2. And I don't get it, because it's seriously not that bad. Yes, the gameplay was changed very drastically from the first game, and the escort missions made me want to hurt small, adorable creatures, but besides that, this is a ton of fun to go through. While the first Jak and Daxter was a collectathon to the likes of Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64, this one is like, well, it's actually a lot like Grand Theft Auto. It's a sandbox layout, you can hijack cars, and instead of using Daxter as his primary weapon, Jak grew a pair and whips out a fucking gun to shoot everyone with. Because that's what a man does! Naughty Dog took a very serious risk, which I'd say paid off in the end, by making the story a lot more serious and, well, darker. It picks up right where Precursor Legacy left off, with Jak and Daxter having assembled the artifacts of the Precursors, and having the machine that you were working towards in the first game ready to go. And remember, this was originally just a quest to turn your friend back into a human, but you slowly started to uncover a plot of literal gods. The machine turns on, and you are instantly sucked into an alternate dimension, where Jak is arrested on sight because some emperor has demanded it. Then, in storyline-wise, Jak is treated as a scientific guinea pig for the next several years, while Daxter tries to rescue him. Daxter's story is actually covered in a PSP game, but maybe we'll talk about that another time. He does eventually find Jak, but it's too late. He's already become something sort of like the Hulk of all things. Jak was infused with Dark Eco, which means that anytime he becomes very angry, he turns into a different version of himself. Stronger, more agile, and definitely more angry than normal Jak. It gets worked into the gameplay, sort of like Ripper mode from Metal Gear Rising. And then we have what some people consider to be the stupidest thing on the planet, which is that Jak is no longer a mute and can actually talk. I consider this the opposite of stupid though, as you're more emotionally attached to the character and can feel every move he makes to be wiser. And it's actually set up very differently from the first, as instead of a world with a set number of tasks to complete, there are actually missions with specific things you need to do to win. And once again, while the escort missions are awful, and the world might be slightly bland, I still enjoy this one a great deal more than the first. The bosses are better, the gameplay is easier to get into, and it's overall a more polished game. I can say wholeheartedly that if you like the first one, you will probably enjoy this one. Go into it with an open mind, and try not to make too many comparisons to Precursor Legacy. If you do that, I personally think that you'll have fun, and can enjoy this game for what it is, not for what it isn't. That's a philosophy to live by. Hey guys, remember when Sony made handhelds that didn't blow ass? Those were the days. And remember when it didn't take them 5,726,036 years to make a Ratchet & Clank game? Those were the days. So what do? You put them together! Now it's time for another story. When I was younger, I used to go to this daycare center after school called Champions. Kind of ironic because it sucked there and I hated every single moment of it. But one thing that was actually kind of cool about it is that every Friday they'd let you bring something to play with, and it could even be electronic. This one kid brought a PSP, and after seeing it, I knew I must have one. So I got one for my birthday, and Ratchet & Clank's Size Matters came with it. Of course, this wasn't the first Ratchet game I had played, that was the original on the PS2, but it was still the first one I got way into. And I'm not joking, I spent hours upon hours playing through this game, and even went through it multiple times, making this the first game I've ever done that with. This game has a shit ton of replay value, and I can honestly say that if I ever get the chance to play through it again, I will. And before anything says anything, yes, I know that this was on the PS2, but this was the first place I played it. Hell, I haven't even touched that version because it's unholy. Also, the notion of a portable Ratchet game is really cool, so that adds to the appeal of it all. Another reason this game is great is because of the fact that the plot does not take itself seriously at all. Have you guys noticed that? This series always seems to have uber serious stories, or ones that honestly a second grader could have come up with. I always enjoy the less serious ones because they're silly and more fun to mess around with. And oh boy, this game seems to have mastered the art of goofing off, because it's not serious by any manner of the word. Basically, Quark's dad wants to take over the world, and it's your job to stop him. There is some more of it, even going into the guy making robotic clones of Ratchet that you have to fight off, but I always like to leave it simple and appealing. The locations in this game are also really enjoyable, and all stand out in their own way. This game just focuses on fun, and I love everything about it. And might I say, with the Ratchet & Clank remake planned for the PS4, any chance this one will get a little love? Probably not, but a man can dream, damn it!
Stop giving up. You can't do it. Do it. You should get to the point where anyone else would quit. Do it. Just do it. What are you waiting for? Do it. Just do it. Do it. Wake up and work. Do it. Just do it.